on a plane and they don't make it. We'd like to give you right now some phone numbers if you need some help and some websites. Here right now for family members, American Airlines 1-800-245-0999. United Airlines 1-800-932-8555.
The American Red Cross 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. LA City Services 888-356-4661. Crisis Counseling 800-854-7771.
Long Beach Emergency 562-570.
5. FEMA 800-462-9029.
Army Pentagon Hotline is 800-984-8523. Naval Pentagon Hotline 877-663-6772.
Victims of Crime Hotline 800-331-0075. And the FBI for information, if you have information, www.ifccfbi.gov.
And here's for UC Berkeley People Locator. That's going to go by quickly, so let me give you our Fox 11 website, www.fox11la.com. It has all of those numbers and websites for you.
While some businesses closed down and sent their workers home today, schools across the Southland kept their doors open. And as of now, the plan is for them to be open tomorrow as well. Barbara Schroeder explains why.
Elementary school children playing, an oddly reassuring look at how life goes on in the face of tragedy. At middle schools, too, and high schools all across LA, classes were in session. Some students were worried.
I just hope they don't come over here.
Many trying to wrap their minds around concepts they had only read about in history books until now.
Whoever doing it is got something wrong with their head or something.
My heart goes out to all the pilot families and out to the families on board.
Some parents pulled their children out of school today.
My daughter is very nervous, and I know she wouldn't be comfortable being in school and not knowing what's going on.
Emerson Middle School is the school closest to Westwood's Federal Building. Dozens of parents showed up early.
I heard the Federal Building was being evacuated, so I thought, you know, my kids are close. So I'm highly concerned. As a mom, a mother's instinct is to protect their kids.
Superintendent Roy Romer says schools will stay open.
These youngsters need to stay and focus on their materials. It's much better than being at home and seeing the repetition of this tragedy on television.
He wants parents to know security will be beefed up and crisis counselors will be available for parents, teachers, and kids.
The best thing parents can do is to talk with them, get a conversation going immediately, help them understand that tragedy occurs. We try very hard to prevent it. And we'll think about this one and try to prevent it even in a better way in the future. But help them know that we can be safe in this world.
As flags were lowered this afternoon at all schools, a memo went out to officials urging them to be role models for children as to how to handle this crisis. As Romer put it, a terrorist's game is to disrupt your life. Don't let them have an even greater victory. In Los Angeles, Barbara Schroeder, Fox 11 News.
Top center tower to the Trade Center.
See the damage to that.
The ground look on in horror as workers in the Trade Center towers fall or maybe even jump to their deaths. 9:30 a.m. the president in Florida.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The airport's being evacuated. They need to go home.
9:40. All American airports have been closed, but there are still planes in the sky. And minutes later, one of them crashes into the Pentagon.
Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal.
9:59. As the Pentagon burns, the South Tower of the World Trade Center buckles and collapses. 10:29, the second Trade Center tower collapses. An American landmark is in ruins.
Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
Thousands feared dead, lower Manhattan shrouded in smoke and debris. 10:48, police in western Pennsylvania confirmed that a fourth hijacked plane crashed a half hour earlier outside Pittsburgh.
Enormous loss of life there.
Noon, shock and disbelief. As the dead and wounded are taken to East Coast hospitals, officials in New York and Washington report a shortage of blood and appeal to Americans to donate their blood. Late afternoon, New Yorkers are evacuating lower Manhattan by the thousands. Parts of the city unrecognizable. a third building at the Trade Center, this one 47 stories, collapses at Bellevue Hospital. An official says, quote, "It is a catastrophe of unparalleled proportions." Peter Viles, New York.
It is indeed. With that, we here at Fox 11 News say goodnight. We are going to rejoin Fox News for continuing coverage of today's terrorist attacks on the United States.
And Fox 11 News will have the latest on the terrorist attack, beginning with the Fox 11 Morning News at 5 a.m. Thank you for being with us tonight. Good night.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
September 11th, 2001, a day in America that will live in infamy.
An unimaginable horror. 4 jetliners, all hijacked, 3 of them deliberately flown into major American landmarks. Thousands of people injured, thousands of people dead for sure. That death toll could reach 4 figures or perhaps even higher. It is 3 a.m. in the East, midnight in the West, and we're glad you're with us. I'm Rick Fulbaum.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lori Dew. Welcome to Fox News' continuing coverage of Terrorism Hits America. This is a multi-pronged story as we come to you at this hour. The FBI is looking into a possible link between these attacks and the international terrorist Osama bin Laden.
And the other part of the story is that rescue workers are mounting 2 massive efforts. They're sifting through the rubble at the destroyed World Trade Center Plaza in New York City and also the damaged Pentagon in Northern Virginia. And there are reports that some victims on the 4 hijacked airplanes made last-second goodbyes from their cell phones before those planes crashed. We begin our coverage this hour with David Lee Miller in downtown Manhattan, where the skyline there has been changed forever. David?
That's right, Rick, and so too have the lives of New Yorkers and in many ways Americans as well. Now, a massive search and rescue effort is now underway at this hour. The authorities say as many as 2,000 searchers are taking part. We expect that it's really going to begin in earnest when dawn begins. We have some new pictures to show you. Now, these are unedited pictures. They are raw pictures, but they're important to see. They were recorded just a short time ago, and they were taped right near the World Trade Tower, what was once that site, near New York's West Side Highway. And here you can see the fallen debris. You can see a footbridge over the highway that has collapsed. You can see the ground covered with white ash. It looks almost like a dusting of heavy snow, and you can also see the remnants of some of the people who fled the scene and perhaps who died in this horrible, vicious attack. Now, we also have some live pictures we can show you, which are tell you what is unfolding now about 6 blocks behind me here on Church Street in Lower Manhattan. This is the scene now where rescue workers are beginning their operation. The authorities believe that thousands of people are now buried under once what was the World Trade Center. Not known how many of them might be alive. The mayor of New York, Mayor Giuliani, has said that at least 2 people trapped under the rubble were able to call their family in Seattle. So definitely people are alive. How many, we do not know. It's really going to be a race against the clock to get them out. All but certain now they're going to be bringing in sniffer dogs, acoustical equipment to try and detect the people that are buried. But as I mentioned, it's not clear how badly they are hurt or how much longer they can last. The mayor said it's going to take at least a few days before we can get some type of clear estimate as to exactly how many people have actually been killed. And as for the scene right now in Lower Manhattan, as you can tell, the electricity is off here. The authorities have turned it off. They have disconnected the gas in order to prevent the possibility of explosions or further fire. And the lights you do see are provided by batteries or generators. It almost almost makes for a very surreal setting. But as dawn approaches, the search itself is going to begin in earnest, as I said, and at that time we expect that some of the officials here are going to start to make some very gruesome discoveries. Back to you in the studio.
All right, David Lee Miller, thanks very much, David. As we continue to look at some live pictures of the devastation, a lot of the injured are being treated at a nearby hospital, New York's St. Vincent's Hospital.
Derry Alexander has been there all night. She joins us again with the latest. Derry.
Hey, Lori. You know, once again, we, along with hospital workers, are playing the waiting game. We haven't seen any EMS trucks come up here anytime soon, and I guess, you know, as David was talking about it takes quite a while for them to get through all of that rubble. I know that because David is a journalist and they pushed a lot of people back pretty far, it's hard perhaps to get somewhat of a perspective on what's going on, but I'm standing here with Rafael de la Peña, who is a reserve member of the National Guard. He was out there early this morning between the plane strikes, so he was there after the first, helping some of the people, and was there when it happened. And I was talking with Rafael earlier, asking him to give me a little bit of a perspective of what this rubble looks like, so we can understand exactly how long and what has to be done to really get those people out. Those people we're hoping that are still alive. And you heard also the report that people were calling
on the cellular
cell
phones. Yeah, that gives us a lot of hope, especially for people like me that were there from the very early of the disaster. And we saw actually people jumping through the windows, people falling, the actual 2 towers collapse, actually the 3rd tower collapsed, the number 7. And we could only do the first phase of the search and rescue, which is not moving any debris, just with the dogs. But after that, it was getting too dark, and they told us that it was over. So they now have to bring the big trucks to move the debris. Then we received the news that they're activating another 50 ambulances here, because there's people calling from cellular phones inside the debris.
Now that is certainly, we're very happy to hear that. I know that you and I talked about the fact that what we don't want to talk about is what you saw immediately after the blast, the bodies, all of that stuff. But help me out here. Describe to me, you talked about like a 2-story high pile of debris. I mean, help us understand how you get people out of all of that. I mean, because that's obviously what we're waiting for, those people who are alive under there.
Well, the sensation that we get from the actual activity of rescuing, it could be overcome by the fear of another explosion. See, when you're walking in top of this debris trying to get people out, you're also scared because you don't know if it's going to explode again. And what we did is the most we could, moving debris that was little, and actually, trying not to hurt people more.
That's right.
Because that's why they can use trucks until we finish. When we finish, that's when the big trucks come in. They actually gave up at that point, and they were just moving big debris when they started hearing people calling. So this is like a renewal of the spirit of going back again, which I'm going back again next morning to continue doing the search and rescue.
Now, describe to me, though, the huge chunks of debris. I mean, a lot to move down there, right?
Okay, first, if you want, I could tell you, actually, when it fell down, that's the whole thing. When it fell down, you saw the cloud of smoke, and you could not see if the actual debris was coming in top of you. You just saw the cloud coming in top of you. So you're running thinking that something is going to hit you.
Right.
So when you come back, you actually expect to see the debris all over. And it was neatly in top of a pile, like I would say like almost 2 blocks. And it was 2-story or almost 3-story high. Okay. The pieces of debris were not small.
Okay.
But some of it became sand. Some of the, what do you call it?
The debris, the little spectacles.
They became sand. So it makes it harder for us to see and breathe inside of the actual zone.
Well, you were certainly one of the lucky ones that definitely got out of there. And as we reported to you earlier, about 45 rescue workers did come through this hospital. One firefighter did die. But once again, as you just heard Raphael say, a high spirit. They had to reassess at 5:30, figure out what they could do. But once again, they have a high spirit again, went back down there, and Raphael will be back down there tomorrow, hoping once again to find some more people that they can bring up here and treat. That's what's happening here outside of St. Vincent's Hospital. Back to you guys.
All right, Derry Alexander at St. Vincent's, thanks very much. Well, one question looms in the minds of Americans. Who is responsible? Well, possible suspects are emerging in this terrorist attack.
And Fox's Todd Connor is live now from Fox Central with this late-breaking story. Todd?
That's right, Rick and Lori. As you know, the newspaper is starting to hit the newsstands this morning, and one of the stories from the Boston Herald has apparently led police to, or the story is about police finding some possible suspects out of Logan International Airport in Boston. The story goes that authorities in Massachusetts have identified at least 5 Arab men as suspects. They launched from Logan International Airport. Police seized in the central parking garage a car filled with Arabic language flight training manuals, according to the source for the Boston Herald. Now, 2 of the men whose passports were traced to United Arab Emirates were brothers, one of whom was a trained pilot, according to this source. Now, at least 2 other suspects flew into Logan yesterday from Portland, Maine, where authorities believe they had traveled to after crossing over from Canada. Once in the air, according to this source of the Boston Herald, the hijackers in one of the 2 planes that left Boston that hit the Twin Towers began killing flight attendants in order to lure a pilot out of the cockpit and then take over the plane. They started killing stewardesses in the back of a plane as a diversion. The pilot came back to help, and that is how they got into the cockpit, according to the source. The suspects apparently had no guns, but used shaving kits and other carry-on luggage to smuggle knife-like weapons made up of plastic handles with razor blades inserted into those handles. That's what they used as their weapons, according to this source for the Boston Herald. People were calling the plane, as we've heard many reports, you two have reported, saying they were going to die. They were calling 911. In fact, one stewardess called her husband to say goodbye. Now, how did the authorities find this rental car in the first place? It's believed they were led to the rental car by a civilian who got into an altercation, he says, with several Arab men as they were parking their car. This man had gotten onto a flight, flew to his location, and it wasn't until he got off his flight yesterday and heard the news about the plane crashes and the hijacking that this came back to him about his altercation with these gentlemen in this parking garage. Well, he called authorities, and authorities traced his story back to this car, and that's how they found this car at Logan International Airport. Again, just to recap, this car apparently filled with Arabic language flight training manuals, and they found some passports, apparently, according to this story in the Boston Herald, and one of those passports belongs to a gentleman from the United Arab Emirates who is a trained pilot. Whether these men are really suspects in this or not, I'm sure we'll find out in the days to come, but that's the latest story hitting the newsstands this morning in the Boston Herald. Lori and Rick, back to you.
Todd Connor from Fox Central, thanks very much. And of course, we'll keep you posted on any developments regarding that story. But now we want to give you a recap of the tragic events of today. At 9:31 a.m., after the 2 hijacked planes smashed into the World Trade Center, President Bush, who was in Florida, calls the crashes an apparent attack on our country, an apparent terrorist attack on our country. At 9:40 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, carrying 64 people from Washington to Los Angeles, crashes into the Pentagon. At 9:48 a.m., the Capitol and the West Wing of the White House are evacuated. Immediately after, the FAA bars aircraft takeoffs across the country in an unprecedented act. International flights in progress are told to land in Canada. At 10 a.m., United Flight 93 crashes 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Between 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., government buildings across the country are evacuated, including the Capitol and the White House. At 11:40 a.m., President Bush arrives at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. About 2 hours later, the president leaves Barksdale for a secure, undisclosed location. At 2:51 p.m., the Navy dispatches missile destroyers and other equipment to both New York and Washington. At 7 p.m., President Bush arrives in Washington from Nebraska. We want to take a closer look now at what has been happening in New York as we look at live pictures of what is left of the World Trade Center towers.
It started just before 9 a.m. Eastern Time with word that a plane had crashed into one tower of New York's World Trade Center. It could have been an accident until this.
We just saw another one. We just saw another one. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks.
And Americans watched in shock as a second jetliner flew straight into the second tower.
Let's go! I'm standing on the corner watching, taking pictures. You can see the wings of the plane come from the south and hit the middle of the second building.
We're walking the dogs and we saw a plane flying really low, a small jet, and it flew directly into the World Trade Center, and then all the pieces fell to the bottom in seconds.
It was chaos.
Just get out of the tunnel and it blew.
Built in the mid-1960s, the World Trade Center towered over Manhattan, each tower 110 stories. Over 40,000 people work in the two buildings. It is still unclear how many people were in the towers when the planes crashed and how the evacuation was going an hour later when we watched aghast as the towers collapsed. The skyline of Manhattan has changed forever. New York's Twin Towers are gone.
Pictures this of the second of the two World Trade Center towers collapsing.
Oh my God. There's been a huge explosion. Everyone's running in the other direction. There's been a huge explosion. Everyone's running for their lives, literally. Police, media. I see a woman pushing a baby carriage.
No, I'm all right. Let me go. I saw the building falling down.
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
Some people jumping from the building.
I had just gotten out of the building. I was crossing the street when I heard some rumbling. I saw someone coming off the top of the building. I just ran. I didn't know where to go. My first reaction was to go down to a subway stop just to get some cover because I felt this cloud of all this stuff, the stuff coming down, the debris, and I thought that was the best, smartest thing, but I got stuck in there for a while. It was pitch dark.
And now, all we are left with are questions. Who could have done this? What is the toll in human lives?
What happened was I was down in the basement. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang.
Yeah, I'm here.
And the elevator doors blew open. Some guy was burnt up. So I dragged him out. His skin was all hanging off. So I dragged him out and I pulled him out of the parking lot. This was what was left on it.
And what will happen now?
And the destruction did not end with the attacks in the morning. At approximately 5:20 p.m., Building 7 of the World Trade Center collapsed. That 47-story building had been weakened by the fires and the other collapses in the area. That building had already been evacuated.
So, as Lori said, the big question on everybody's mind is who could have done this, how could it have happened, and what happens now? What's the appropriate response? Joining us now is Michael Knock. He is the Dean and Professor of Public Policy at the University of California in Berkeley. And Dean Knock, thanks very much for joining us at this late hour. We appreciate it, sir. The first question, what is the appropriate response? We've heard from the President that we will hunt down and pursue those responsible. What does that entail? When he says that, what is he talking about?
Well, first, it appears from the recent press reports that they've made tremendous progress in linking the events, the horrible events of today, to the bin Laden group. Now, we still have to hear more, but it appears now increasingly likely that bin Laden's group was behind this set of attacks.
Okay, so
and if that's true,
yeah.
that's the first step, because often terrorists don't leave calling cards, and that's a huge perplexing issue in fighting terrorism. You don't know who to respond against because you don't know who did it. we may be over that hurdle rather quickly, I think surprisingly quickly.
Well, with what we know about bin Laden, though, who has followers and I guess what they call cells all around the world,
yes.
How easy is it to link these separate attacks to one man?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, there are press reports, as you've reported, of folks who may have trained pilots who've been in Boston. There's a man in Florida, I think, who's under arrest, or they've been trying to arrest him, and other individuals. If they can document that bin Laden was the orchestrator of this, there's still speculation, I think more than speculation, that he's still in Afghanistan. Then I think you will see a coordinated effort by the United States to apprehend bin Laden.
To apprehend him or to assassinate him?
Well, you know, at the moment, assassination of foreign leaders, even non-governmental leaders, is prohibited by American law. Now, that has not prevented the United States from taking military action against foreign leaders when we were in a seeming state of war. We did that clearly against Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War. We even did it in the Reagan administration. I think, of course, is still to be laid out.
Would you agree, though, sir, that it needs to happen soon? That some kind of game plan it must already be in the works, wouldn't you think?
Oh, of course, and after all, force, and perhaps even coordinated with other governments. And I think
a question for you. The fact that whoever was responsible hijacked 4 planes simultaneously indicates that there was a major break in airport security.
Right.
And,
well, I think now, I was speculating about that along with others early this morning, but now there's a lot more evidence that suggests it's almost certainly the case. First of all, there have been some people who've done kind of investigative reporting about the porous security of airports. Now, members of bin Laden's group who were on the ground. Now, they could have been workers who load the meals onto the airplane. Mm-hmm. They could be, you know, they could be in a lot of support roles, but could have facilitated the smuggling of weapons onto the airplane.
Final question for you, Dean. What changes are we likely to see come out of this, both in airport security and aviation security in a larger sense?
Oh, I think we're going to, this is not only a horrific event of unprecedented proportions on American territory, but it's going to have profound effects on these matters. They're talking about far more stringent search procedures now, which might require passengers, all of us, to get to the airport several hours in advance of flights. So there's a huge new queuing problem that will result. They could be much more intrusive with their inspections than ever before. There's going to be a whole crackdown and a whole review of the support facilities and all the personnel who work at the airports. And I think in general you're going to see major resources and major attention to airport security. Now, of course, doing that will have solved in a way possibly yesterday's problem, and now there'll be some new problem tomorrow that'll, even in the event that bin Laden is apprehended or his entire organization gets sort of wiped out, it's not at all clear that this sort of action will end, because I think, as was cited in one of your early reports, there are many other individuals who are very sympathetic with what bin Laden is trying to do, and it well may be that if he falls, others will move forward to pick up and carry forward his torch.
Dean Michael Nacht of the University of California at Berkeley. Dean, thanks very much again for joining us at this late hour. I just want to let you know we've been looking at some just horrific pictures, both video and these are still pictures. We want to tell you that the still pictures that you're seeing that are just unbelievable, look at that, come courtesy of the New York Post.
Well, shortly after the 2 planes smashed into the World Trade Center, the nerve center of the United States military, the Pentagon, of course, was struck by a 3rd hijacked plane. Brian Wilson has been standing by live for us all night at the Pentagon. He has the very latest. Brian, is the fire still burning? I think I can see it behind you.
There are still a few wisps of smoke and steam rising from the building. The firefighters from Arlington County say that at first light they have a plan to snuff out the last remaining hot spots, and then they hope to move forward to a recovery and rescue effort and try to see if there are perhaps anybody who might have survived this crash that has now occurred almost 18 hours ago. I was on Capitol Hill early this morning when we first heard the explosions across the river and knew that what had happened in New York was also beginning to happen in Washington. The Capitol was evacuated, and eventually I made my way over here. We are continuing to monitor the situation. Here's what we know. 9:40 this morning, a plane left Dulles Airport a few minutes before that. It headed toward Washington after being hijacked. And apparently, some people believe actually was initially headed toward the White House, was making a beeline right for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Something happened, we don't know what, but it made a big circle, came around, and slammed in full throttle in a nose dive right into the south side of the Pentagon behind me. We have some pictures perhaps we can show you of some of the damage taken up close earlier in the evening before it got dark, and you can see twisted metal. But this is an old-fashioned building built with a lot of brick and mortar and stone and granite and marble, and it takes an awful lot to dent this building. Even so, even with this massive construction and the massive size of this building, the plane was able to penetrate 3 of the 5 rings of the Pentagon, from the outer E ring all the way into the C ring. The Arlington County Fire Department now estimates that the death toll could run between 100 and 800. Now, there's a big variety between those two numbers, but they say it's awful hard to pin it down beyond that. Everyone aboard the plane believe, of course, to be perished, but there is some question about how many people might have been working in the Pentagon at the time of the attack. We are told that the area could potentially house as many as 850 military employees. So they are giving us, when they say 1 to 800, they're giving us the best case all the way up to the worst case scenario. We'll wait to see more on that tomorrow. But one thing we should tell you is that throughout it all, the Pentagon continued to operate. There's an area deep within the belly of this beast where they house the National Military Command. It stayed in operation throughout, and it will continue to stay in operation. We are under threat condition Delta, the highest defense condition that we can be in right now, and there are planes circling the Washington area. A complete air lockdown continues to protect the nation's capital and the President of the United States. Back to you.
All right, that is reassuring to know that at least the Pentagon is still operating. Brian Wilson, thanks very much for the update. Target America, we saw that yesterday morning. Unfortunately, we are no longer unfamiliar with devastating acts aimed directly at Americans. A look now at some of the attacks that have changed this country.
The attack was carried out by Jap torpedo planes together with dive bombers.
We went to war after terror came to our shores on the wings of Japanese bombers.
The bomb hit caused the Arizona to blow up.
We were terrified when car bombs exploded at our embassy in Beirut, but we prayed it wouldn't happen again on our soil until it did. We were a country under siege when a bomb went off in the basement of the World Trade Center.
It sounded like a bomb, then it sounded like something was falling, but it felt like an earthquake.
One guy came running out on fire. He was smoking, he was on fire.
It was terror in the heartland when a truck loaded with fertilizer blew up at the federal building in Oklahoma City, and we were outraged when we found out the man who did it was an American. The bombing in Centennial Park rocked the Olympic Games as the world watched, and the simultaneous attacks on our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania brought fear that terrorism was coming close to America. Then the USS Cole, a Navy vessel, bombed while it stopped to refuel in Aden, Yemen. But nothing could prepare us for today. 4 planes hijacked, each with a target. 2 to the World Trade Center, the 2 biggest buildings in New York City. 1 to the Pentagon, the heart of our military. The 4th crashed near Pittsburgh. Reportedly, it was heading for Camp David, the presidential retreat, and perhaps ironically, the location where the Camp David Middle East Peace Accord was signed. There is no doubt that terror has come to our shores, and the big question is who? Who is so full of hate that they could cause such destruction? The Afghanistan government, the Taliban, accused in the past of providing sanctuary for terrorist Osama bin Laden, claims they and he are not responsible. David Asman, Fox News.
It is 3:30 a.m. in the east. It's 12:30 a.m. out west. We are about 18 and a half hours or so since the start of this national nightmare, and yet it's a story that continues to build, and as we learn more and more, there are some newspaper reports about possible suspects. There are more and more people pointing the finger to Osama bin Laden and his terrorism network based out of Afghanistan. We're going to have every angle of this story covered for you throughout the next half hour and on right here on Fox News.
And indeed, thousands of people have been injured in these attacks. The death toll expected to reach 4 figures if it hasn't already, perhaps even higher. Rescue workers are mounting massive efforts. They are sifting through the rubble that was destroyed at the World Trade Center as we look at live pictures where once the World Trade Center Twin Towers proudly stood until about 18 hours ago.
That's a live picture, and standing just below where that camera is perched is our Molly Falconer, who's been out there all day, first at St. Vincent's Hospital and now down at this Church Street location where we've got her standing by with an update on what's going on there now. Hi, Molly.
Good morning. It's a scene of continuous activity, but still there are more questions than answers. We've got about 2,000 search and rescue personnel just combing the scenes this morning, but the news is not good. There are several hundred, about 300 firemen who are missing. We're not sure if they're believed dead, but they're already missing right now. We are told by a few construction workers on the scene that one person is trapped beneath the rubble and they may have to amputate his leg in the next few moments just to get him out from under and all of the wreckage. If you can look behind me, you can see kind of the scene of continuous activity. New York Fire Department, New York City Police Department on scene, but we've been seeing from many different states, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, all personnel is on hand here to try and get people out of the rubble. Now we have some live pictures for you from our mass cam. If you can see that, you can see several city blocks to the south on Church Street where the World Trade Center once stood. Some of the burning rubble there, they're still having to douse some of it because it's still smoking. Some of it is still apparently on fire, and they've got water on some of those buildings. Now I should tell you that they've already turned the electricity off, the gas off, and the phones off. Certainly on this block, and we've heard over a 30-block radius here to prevent any kind of explosions or fire from happening. Again, this entire scene is locked down. You cannot get in or out except on foot or in an emergency vehicle. President Bush declaring war on terrorism, and there's just a bit of a war on the ground here this morning as the police and rescue teams try and comb through this rubble. There is no word yet, and there wasn't yesterday, or I should say earlier today, at the hospital of the number of wounded or dead we may be seeing, and still that ambiguity holds because things are just so chaotic here already. Crews are going through the rubble. We've got 2 Port Authority officers who were rescued. They were rescued alive out of the shrapnel this morning, but we've got numerous people still under there. Again, we have 2,000 rescue workers still combing the scene. We should have updates for you throughout the day. We'll throw it back to you right now.
All right, Molly Falconer down in Lower Manhattan. Thanks very much. You know, the bloodied and the broken bodies of victims from this terrorist attack are piling into hospitals. They have been since this morning. Many were taken to St. Vincent's Hospital in New York City. It is the hospital that is closest to where you're looking right now, and that is the area where the World Trade Center Twin Towers stood until about 18 hours ago. Our own Derry Alexander joins us now live from St. Vincent's with the latest. Hi, Derry.
Hi, Lori. You know, in the last hour, we've seen some very interesting things. I saw a Jeep painted in camouflage with National Guard people in camouflage come rolling down the middle of Manhattan. Very strange feel. Heard more fighter jets just swirling around Manhattan again. Once again, a very strange feel, very, very eerie. Perhaps, maybe, perhaps now a slight glimmer of hope that I can offer you. I just heard a report from a volunteer here at St. Vincent's Hospital that 2 paramedics came here to clean themselves off because this is according to this volunteer, may have found 7 people alive in the rubble, but are having a hard time getting to them. Once again, this is a report that I heard from a volunteer who's been working at this hospital. She's a social worker, obviously offering any kind of counseling to any people. We've had a few spouses who've come up here who have reported that their spouses were missing. So she's been counseling them, but once again, a report that 7 people may have been identified alive in that rubble. So that's certainly, you know, if in fact that turns out to be true, a definite piece of good news. Oh, you know what? I am going to move over here because I believe that this is the volunteer right here who gave me this confirmation. And I'm going to ask you, who are you? Were you down on the scene?
Yes, earlier this morning, actually, I was at the north side of the one of the world, actually at the One World Trade Center, when I believe.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm not sure that I have the right person, so I'm just not going to go ahead with that. But I do have. The woman who was the volunteer who told me this information is on the scene here, and once again has said that she heard from some paramedics, that man was not a paramedic, that they may have identified 7 people alive in the rubble. So that's actually what's going on right here. We're hearing that they may not be brought here soon because obviously it is tough to get those people out because of the condition that they may be in. But once again, if we can get a concrete confirmation of that, that will certainly be a light in all of this. So that's what's going on here at St. Vincent's. Back to you guys.
All right, Daria Alexander down at the hospital. Thanks very much, Daria. I just want to mention you've been watching our pictures and a constant thing at the bottom of your screen, something that we in the TV business call a crawl because it's crawling from one side of your screen to the other right along the bottom. We've been telling you about the World Trade Center towers down in Lower Manhattan. They used to be down in Lower Manhattan. And below, on the bottom of our screen, are the list of tenants. These are the companies that used to hold their offices there. These are buildings that once stood 110 stories tall. And at their capacity, when they were filled with all the workers, there were some 50,000 people in both of those towers, and we wanted to let you know the names of the companies that were once based there, and so that's what you're seeing. Kidder, Peabody and Company, Korea Local Authority Foundation for the International, and so forth, and you can watch that on the bottom of your screen. You know, our financial markets never opened on Tuesday because of these terror attacks, and we're also told they won't be open on Wednesday either.
But in Japan, the trading session has just ended for the day, and Great Britain is just getting started. Fox senior business correspondent Karen Gibbs joins us now here in the studio with a look at how the terror attacks are affecting the international markets. It's been a long day and a long night for you. What can you tell us about that?
That it's still going on, and the markets are still weaker. In fact, we did see Tokyo close now. It's off 6.6%. This is the lowest close in Tokyo in 18 years. And of course, you can imagine not only the financial sector, and you're looking at a chart of the trading session today, you see that dramatic opening, and then it just kind of petered off. Most of the trade was thin, and it was limited to executing traders' orders, closing out positions, etc. But it looks like the selling pressure is building as we go into Paris, which is off almost 5%, and it is the CAC 40 now is below 4,000 for the first time in over 2 years. Germany, there was some question whether that market was going to open. The DAX DAX is trading, although trade is thin there as well, but it's off 2.25%. And remember, the FTSE Financial Times Stock Exchange Index did have a chance to respond early Tuesday morning and saw a sharp fall off. While it has resumed trading today, it is off another 1.73%. And as I said, the trade is thin because they don't have the main driver of this world's economy, the U.S., to follow. And so we've got closing markets here, the Amex, the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, as well as the New York Mercantile Exchange, which is right across the street from where the World Trade Center was. This is where we trade gold. This is where we trade crude oil futures and its products, heating oil and gasoline. You're not going to see any type of trading there, and people will be unable to react to the rally that we're seeing in the crude oil prices. Crude oil now over $31 per barrel, and some saying it could even hit $40 a barrel, the same level it hit around the Persian Gulf crisis. Gold is normally a safe haven in times of unrest, whether it's political or economic, and gold has reacted. It is jumping almost $20 now, just under the $290 per ounce level. And they're telling me that the longer U.S. markets are closed, and it could be for us a period of time because of so much structural damage there, that the selling pressure will build. People are trying to exit positions. They don't like the uncertainty. And whenever the market does open, we could see a big sell-off.
You know, a lot of people have been looking at some of the economic numbers in this country that have been coming in over the last several weeks. The latest, I guess, was the unemployment figure that came in earlier this week. People have been talking about, you know, we're near a recession. Some people saying we're already there. You know, something like this. Could this be enough to push us over the edge?
Economists that I'm talking to around the world are saying, yes, we could see a global recession now because it was consumer confidence that was keeping the United States economy afloat and was helping all the other ones afloat. This act of terrorism could damage consumer confidence. And not to make light of it, you had 50,000 people there that were there, and you could see those people not working. I mean, even the peripheral ones, the guys that had the falafel carts, the shoe shine guys, all of those people are out of a job right now, and the uncertainty is dramatic.
Of course, this is affecting how we live, how we do business, and it is also affecting the airline industry.
Yes.
We're seeing right away commercial air travel could suffer, not surprisingly, as a result of this.
People would be terrified. These 266 passengers, some on pleasure, some on business, but all felt that it was safe to travel. You're going to see a sharp pullback, and the industry itself is saying maybe a 50% fall off in travel. That means that they may be strapped for cash as soon as the end of this month.
And that means, when you say strapped for cash, that's it, no money. So what do they do?
That means that you're going to see a lot of airline stock going down. You could start seeing them warning as the continued market just turns and turns and turns. It's not very good. And certain sectors, like the insurance sector as well, billions of dollars worth of claims there. Those stocks in Tokyo plunged, both banking and airlines.
Senior business correspondent Karen Gibbs. Karen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. All right, well, federal investigators are finding possible links between some of the hijacking suspects and Middle Eastern terrorist Osama bin Laden.
Todd Connor now in Fox Central with the rundown on that late-breaking story. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, Rick and Lori, as you said, the search is on for the identity of these killer pilots and who is behind these attacks that seem professionally planned. Our Carl Cameron has learned that U.S. investigators actually headed for a Florida aviation school. It's called Embry-Riddle University. It's in Daytona. It's known for recruiting students from overseas in the Middle East. It has several sophisticated flight simulators, the types of virtual reality training mechanisms that U.S. investigators say might have been used to train the hijackers who commandeered these jets. Also, U.S. intelligence sources tell Fox News that they intercepted phone calls that link the attacks to Osama bin Laden and sympathizers in Daytona and Broward County, Florida. There's Osama bin Laden right there. Also, Utah Senator Orrin Hatch says that U.S. intelligence intercepted these communications between his supporters discussing the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Senator Hatch was very specific about this when he spoke earlier this evening. He said, U.S. intelligence, they have an intercept of some information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. Senator Hatch apparently had to have very good information to be saying this in front of reporters. Also, investigators say a passenger list from one of the planes included the name of a bin Laden backer from Daytona, Florida. And in addition to media reports in Florida suggest a Middle Eastern student cannot be accounted for at that Embry-Riddle University I was telling you about a moment ago. Also, our Rita Cosby has said that, speaking of all this training that these pilots would need in order to fly these planes the way they did, Rita Cosby reports that bin Laden has a camp in Afghanistan where he is based, where he is living now, that includes pilot training, among other training. So, according to all of our sources and what we know here at Fox News, a lot of fingers pointing at bin Laden, and according to Senator Orrin Hatch, our intelligence sources have some very good evidence that at least would get us started toward bin Laden and considering him a main suspect in this. Also, just a quick point. As you two know, there were at least 4 cell phone calls made from these flights before they crashed. As far as we know, nobody was able to or did identify the nationality of any of these hijackers. Whether that was intentional, they were told not to for fear of their lives, we don't know. At least we haven't heard here at Fox News the nationality during those phone calls. But that's the latest from Fox Central. Back to you two.
All right, Todd Connor down in Fox Central. Thanks very much, Todd. You know, the greatest special effects wizards in Hollywood could not have come up with the images that we have seen unfolding across our television screens all day long. We've got some new video that we're going to bring you in just a few minutes, the very first pictures. We're going to get that video to you just as quickly as we can.
Well, our country will be forever scarred by the coordinated attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Will the way of life in this country now change?
The skyline of New York changed forever. And with it, the landscape of America. Today, the nation is reminded there are forces at work in our world that would destroy us all if they could.
This has been an absolutely unbelievable morning. The news is breaking almost faster than we can get it to you right now. Both buildings are down now.
Taken down by enemies so motivated and so willing to act. Now, what will the United States response against them be? Not just today, but in the weeks to come and for the future of this nation.
The city is closed. You cannot leave the city.
In New York, the tunnels and bridges to Manhattan closed. Many of the subway stations down. The financial markets canceling trading. Workers sent home. Hospitals initiating enormous disaster plans. And in and around Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol, all evacuated. The president airborne. Location undisclosed. Fighter jets escorting Air Force One. Across America, all air travel suspended for the first time in the nation's history. State and federal offices closed. And perhaps most ominously, the United States military went to its highest alert status. For them, we are at war. In the days and weeks that follow, America will take toll of this day. The wounded, treated, the dead, buried, then mourned. And even before the mourning is complete, the nation will turn to preventing this from happening again. But how? And what will those precautions be? Given today's events, no idea, no suggestion seems outrageous. Will armed fighter jets patrol the skies? Will anti-aircraft defenses be put into place in and around major cities? Will New York look like London during World War II? There is no event to which we can turn in order to put today into context. The attacks have no counterpart in world history. As a nation, we can recover, but we will never return to a time before 9/11/2001. Whatever the United States response will be, certainly we're in uncharted waters, and our very livelihoods are at stake. In New York, Shepard Smith, Fox News.
All right, Shep, thanks very much. Now to those pictures that we are just getting in from Gamma Press USA. These are the very first pictures of the very first plane crashing into the North Building. These are pictures that are just coming into us from about 8:45 a.m. this morning. This is American Airlines Flight 11, which left Boston and was then hijacked. And here we watch it again. This is the plane flying into the North Building. Now, it was only minutes later as everyone was just beginning to comprehend what had happened there, that the other building was struck by another plane, and then it was about an hour or so, a little over an hour after these terrible tragedies, that both of these towers on the World Trade Center collapsed.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I almost can't get over it. You see the video, and this is the first time we're seeing it, and it's incredible how fast it happened, and the camera happened to be right there.
Well, the world is in shock, just as we are, over the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center and also at the Pentagon, too.
This is the worst attack of its kind in U.S. history, but as Rick Leventhal reports, Americans being targeted is nothing new.
Horrifying images of Americans attacked by terrorists overseas. Tragically, we've seen these images before. In Beirut on October 23, 1983, a truck loaded with explosives drives into U.S. Marine headquarters, killing 241 American servicemen. Islamic Jihad, a Shiite Muslim group, is linked to the blast. On June 25, 1996, another powerful truck bomb explodes on the perimeter of a military complex near the eastern Saudi Arabian city of Dhahran, killing 19 American servicemen, wounding several hundred people. The government's investigation of the bombing collapsed over disagreements with the Saudis, and Clinton administration officials say we may never know who's responsible. And on August 7, 1998, two bombs explode near U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. At least 257 are killed and more than 5,000 wounded. 12 U.S. citizens are among the dead in Nairobi. No Americans died in the Dar es Salaam attack. The U.S. suspects Osama bin Laden of being the mastermind behind these bombings. Terrorism experts say there's no doubt America and Americans will continue to be vulnerable.
A lot of things have been done to sort of harden the target, but clearly there are so many weak points, and terrorist organizations always seek out the weakest point in the chain, and they're going to attack. So it becomes almost impossible to harden every target, every embassy, every naval war vessel.
Especially, Kushner says, when the terrorists are willing to give up their own lives to take others. Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
All right, let's take a look at those pictures again. They are just spectacular. Gamma Press USA. This is just before 9 a.m. this morning down in Lower Manhattan. That's the north building of the World Trade Center, and that's Flight 11, American Airlines Flight 11, which had been commandeered by a hijacker. Apparently, the hijacker had taken control of the plane and flying it, as you can see, directly into the World Trade Center building. If that building was about 110 stories high, you can see the explosion and the impact, I would guess, probably around floor 85 or so, right up near the top of that building.
American Airlines Flight 11 was a Boeing 67, a large plane. It had left Boston around 8 a.m. or a little before 8 a.m., so around 8:45 a.m. This is when this crash happened, and once again, we're seeing it for the very first time. The plane carried 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. This is what started it all. And about 20 minutes later, of course, the second plane crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. But again, we are looking at the very first video of the first plane crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
This was the first thing that we saw, and everyone was like, what happened there? Was there some sort of explosion? There were reports that a plane had flown into the World Trade Center building. But why would a plane have flown into the World Trade Center? That's what we were all wondering. And so the calls started to come in, and then at about 9:03, just under 20 minutes later, that is when another plane, this one a United Airlines jet, flew into the South Tower, which is the one that's behind this building that you're seeing.